From 1992 to 1994, in Osaka and Saitama, two separate serial murder cases unfolded one after the other, sending a deep shock not only through the dog-loving community, but throughout Japanese society as a whole. Together, these two cases claimed at least 9 lives. The incidents happened at different times, were carried out by different perpetrators, and had no direct organizational link. However, the troubling common thread was that both exploited the trust formed around dogs. The victims were lured through relationships tied to disputes over dog training and dog-related investments, then killed by poison, ranging from substances commonly used in veterinary medicine to far more powerful toxins. Their bodies were then concealed by being disposed of in multiple locations. What was revealed was not just a series of murders, but a pattern of manipulation built on the familiar trust woven into everyday life. As the details gradually emerged, the impact spread far beyond the victims' families, sowing fear throughout Japan's dog-loving community and forcing the public to confront an unsettling truth. Even the closest bonds between humans and animals can be turned into weapons.
Hello, and welcome back to Dark Crimes Real.
For a long time, humans and dogs have walked side by side as close companions. But there have always been unscrupulous businesses that see dogs as nothing more than tools for making money. And because dogs live so closely with people, they've often been pulled into situations born from human greed and malice. This time, we're looking back at a case that once shocked Japan in the period after the economic bubble of the early 1990s collapsed. One of the most notorious cases was a serial murder case tied to the dog-loving community in Osaka, Japan. The series of events unfolded from late June 1992 to October 29, 1993, and it was only exposed in 1994. In November 1993, the 1st Investigation Division of the Osaka Prefectural Police received a report that a man in Osaka City had gone missing. He was last seen around August 1992. After that, they received additional reports about 2 women who disappeared in October 1993. Although all 3 were in their 40s, none of them had any clear reason to leave on their own. Notably, before they vanished, the 2 women took nearly $6,000 in cash and withdrew more than $60,000 from their personal accounts. An investigation was launched, including a review of the victims' social connections. Police found that all 3 were dog lovers and had previously sought advice on dog training from a man who called himself a dog trainer, Yoshinori Ueda. This trainer had been in frequent contact with the 2 women's homes throughout October 1993, but after they went missing, there was no further word from them at all. At the same time, police confirmed that during the exact period the 2 women disappeared, the trainer had rented a car and drove more than 1,000 kilometers before returning it. By December of the same year, the 1st Investigation Division also learned that a former co-worker of the trainer had gone missing as well, and that person was last seen in July 1992. Based on these details, investigators considered the possibility that the 4 disappearances were connected to the same perpetrator, since all 4 individuals were dog lovers or had close ties to dogs, and the circumstances of their disappearances shared multiple similarities, including withdrawing or carrying a large amount of money shortly beforehand. As they dug deeper into the vehicles Yoshinori Ueda had rented, police discovered that right after the 2 women vanished, he drove a rented truck from a vehicle rental company in Sakai City to the home of an acquaintance in Shiojiri City. There, he went on to rent an excavator from a rental company in the same city and transported it to the acquaintance's farm. In addition, police found blood stains in the bed of the rented truck that matched the blood type of one of the 4 missing individuals. In 1994, on January 26th, investigators excavated farmland in Iwadare, Shiojiri City, and discovered the body of a woman placed inside a metal locker, buried at a depth of about 20 centimeters below the ground. Shortly afterward, a joint investigative headquarters was established with the Nagano Prefectural Police to handle the case as a wide-area murder investigation. Yoshinori Ueda was placed on a wanted list by the Osaka Prefectural Police and the Joint Nagano Task Force on suspicion of murder and disposing of a body, and he was arrested in Sakai City later that same day. Yoshinori Ueda was born in 1955 in Yao, Osaka. He was the only child of a wealthy couple who owned a liquor store. Very little is recorded about Ueda's childhood. However, when he was around 30, he agreed, at a friend's request, to act as a guarantor for a loan worth $440,000. The friend then suddenly disappeared, leaving Ueda forced to shoulder the entire debt. Ashamed and unable to handle it on his own, Ueda begged his parents to pay the debt for him. They agreed to help, but after that, his parents forbade him from using the family inheritance without supervision. From that point on, people around him believed his personality had changed completely. Ueda began spending most of his time with his pet dogs, gradually distancing himself from social relationships and preferring the company of animals over people. During a routine checkup at a veterinary clinic, he witnessed someone else's puppy being injected with a muscle relaxant, after which it died. Seemingly fascinated by what he saw, Ueda later found a way to obtain a small amount of the substance, claiming he needed it to run his own test. Sometime later, through an acquaintance who worked as a police dog trainer, Ueda learned about breeding and training dogs. Even though he had no specialized knowledge or professional experience, he believed it was a field that could bring in major profits. With that in mind, Ueda rented several farms in Shiojiri and set up a dog breeding operation and a training facility. Claiming to be an experienced dog trainer, Ueda began placing ads in magazines, reaching out to investors, and approaching people walking their dogs on the street to promote his services. This strategy quickly paid off, drawing the attention of several potential clients and investors. Right after his arrest, Ueda was questioned intensely by investigators until he eventually confessed that he had poisoned 5 of his potential clients. According to his confession, Kashiwai, Fujiwara, and Takahashi were killed because they demanded their money back. Shinji was killed after she found Takahashi's body stuffed inside a vehicle, and Saito was killed following an argument between the 2 men. The bodies of all 5 victims were then buried at the training grounds in Shiojiri. According to Ueda's statement, the first killing took place in mid-June 1992. The victim was a former co-worker of Ueda's. For about 6 months, starting in the summer of 1991, Ueda worked part-time at another company, and that was where he met Hiroshi Saito, who lived in Osaka City. At the time, Ueda was 37 and Saito was 23, a significant age gap. But because both were single, they often went out drinking together. Saito seemed to trust Ueda. During one of those nights out, he shared his thoughts about his sexual orientation with him. However, Ueda then spread that secret around at the workplace where he had been working part-time. Ueda later quit the job in January 1992. A few months after that, while walking his dog, Ueda happened to run into Saito on the street. Saito still hadn't gotten over having his secret exposed and remained bitter toward Ueda. That same day, Saito confronted him directly and told him to stop spreading bad things about him at work. Ueda denied it, saying he didn't remember anything like that, and the two were said to have gotten into a heated argument. From that point on, Ueda's anger toward Saito kept growing until it eventually turned into an intent to kill. Then, around 3 p.m. on June 19th, Ueda called Saito, said he wanted to make up, and invited Saito to get into his car. In the car, Ueda rendered Saito unconscious and drove to a farm in Nagano, where a facilities construction project was underway. Once there, Ueda tied Saito's hands and feet to keep him from moving. Inside the car, he used a muscle relaxant that caused Saito to die. After confirming Saito was dead, Ueda buried his body at the farm. The killing of Saito marked the beginning of a series of murders using the same method. The second victim was Fujiwara, 33, who lived in Higashi Yorikawa Ward, Osaka City. They first met around 1991 after Fujiwara's ex-wife became acquainted with Ueda through an exchange involving a dog specialist license. From there, their relationship developed quickly. Ueda approached the Fujiwara couple, proposing that they open a pet shop together and promising to provide $19,000 in investment capital. He even took Fujiwara to the planned facility site in Nagano to build trust. But of course, Ueda didn't have the financial means to follow through. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Fujiwara repeatedly pressured Ueda to come up with the $19,000 as soon as possible. Ueda began to feel irritated by the pressure and once again formed a horrifying plan. About a month after the Saito killing, on July 26, 1992, Ueda called Fujiwara, carried out the same steps he had used with Saito, and then buried him right there. After killing 2 people in a short period of time, Ueda kept going without any remorse or regret. The third victim was Kashiwai, 20. He worked part-time and helped clear the land at Ueda's request, but his wages were delayed. Kashiwai demanded the money he was owed, but Ueda refused and planned to kill him. By July 30th, Ueda killed Kashiwai. The fourth victim was Satoko Takahashi, 47, a resident of Sumiyoshi, Osaka. They met around January 1993 after Ueda moved into the area. They quickly became close, and Ueda approached Takahashi about jointly managing a real estate business. He made attractive offers in order to draw her in. Trusting Ueda, Takahashi gave him $3,000 to buy breeding dogs. Takahashi said that the large sum was money she had saved through hard work while raising her daughter alone. However, even after taking the money, Ueda still did nothing. Losing patience, Takahashi confronted Ueda in a forceful tone. She demanded that he return the money she had given him, and Ueda began to feel annoyed by what seemed like an obvious demand. Takahashi became a nuisance to Ueda, and once again he decided to remove her. On October 25, 1993, Takahashi was seen in an exhausted state inside a vehicle driven by Ueda. After that sighting, Takahashi's whereabouts disappeared completely. That was not surprising because one day after that last appearance, Ueda killed her at his home in a similar way. Because it happened indoors, Ueda was said to have placed Takahashi's body in a metal locker and hidden it in 2 rented trucks. Even so, Ueda's crimes did not stop during this period. The fifth victim was Nobuko Shioji, 47. They had known each other since Ueda approached Shioji while she was walking her dog, then gradually built trust through interactions connected to caring for dogs. Shioji later handed over a very large sum of money as an investment. When Shioji started pressing him because the plan wasn't moving forward, Ueda decided to act just 3 days after the Takahashi killing. On October 29, 1993, Ueda called Shioji to get into a truck, had her take sleeping pills, and drove off. At the time, the locker containing Takahashi's body was still in the vehicle. When Shioji suddenly woke up, she noticed something was wrong inside the truck, but she had no chance to escape. Ueda stopped the vehicle and killed her. A few days later, Ueda rented an excavator and buried the locker containing Takahashi's body along with Shioji's body at the site in Nagano. On February 10, 1995, investigators excavated the training grounds and successfully recovered the remains of all 5 victims. As a result, Ueda was charged with 5 counts of murder and held in custody pending trial. The first trial at the district court level took place on March 20, 1998. The Osaka District Court determined that Ueda had committed all of the offenses, relying primarily on the confession he gave during the investigation, and sentenced Ueda to death at the initial trial. According to the case, Ueda was involved in financial disputes with the victims surrounding the expansion of a dog breeding operation. Ueda pleaded not guilty, claiming investigators had forced him to confess. However, both the district court and the high court in Osaka ruled that his initial confession to the killings matched the course of the investigation. At the sentencing hearing, Judge Kazuko Yokuo stated, "The defendant killed 5 innocent people for selfish reasons, and this conduct is cruel and inhumane." Judge Yokuo, who served as the presiding judge at the initial trial, added, "The defendant has a tendency to commit murder arbitrarily, and we have no choice but to uphold the death sentence." Ueda later appealed to the Osaka High Court, but the court upheld the earlier ruling on March 15, 2001. His third and final appeal to the Supreme Court was also rejected in 2005, making his death sentence final and legally binding. As of July 2022, Ueda was still awaiting execution. Gen Sekine was born on January 2, 1942, in Chichibu, Saitama Prefecture. He was not only a businessman, but was also described as someone with an oddly magnetic presence, a master manipulator with a sharp ability to anticipate human behavior. After finishing high school, he worked a variety of jobs, including time at a pachinko parlor and a Chinese restaurant, one that was later destroyed in a mysterious fire in which the owner died. From there, Sekine began building his empire around a fascination with imported dog breeds. In the 1980s, Sekine was credited as a pioneer in making Alaskan Malamutes and Siberian Huskies popular in Japan. At first, he ran a pet shop and an animal rental business in Chichibu. But behind the image of a top expert was a network of shady, deceptive business practices. Sekine became known for selling dogs at prices hundreds of times higher than market value, often using schemes such as swapping animals or even stealing back dogs he had already sold so he could resell them to other customers. His success was tied to the bubble economy era, when people in Japan were willing to spend enormous sums on luxury status symbols, including rare pets. Africa Kennel, established in Kumagaya in 1982, became the center of these operations. There, Sekine and his de facto wife, Hiroko Kazama, built a business model rooted in deception and intimidation. Hiroko Kazama was born on February 19, 1957, in Kumagaya. Her father worked in childcare and later became a real estate broker. Quiet but strong-willed and fond of large dogs, Kazama trained to become a land surveyor to help support her father financially. In 1983, she visited Africa Kennel, met Sekine there, and the two married not long afterward. Both had been married before. Sekine had married 3 times, while Kazama was divorced and had 2 children. Some theories claim Sekine married Kazama for the sizable inheritance from her father, while others suggest it was because of her ability to present dogs at competitions and manage the kennel's finances. Although their marriage was far from stable, both had affairs, and Sekine abused Kazama and her children. They still supported each other in running the business. To keep Sekine from wasting money, Kazama staged a divorce and began living as his unofficial wife, which allowed her to be appointed president of Africa Kennel. While it appeared outwardly as a shared ownership arrangement, the real control remained with Sekine, while Kazama handled the finances. Their relationship has been described as a form of criminal symbiosis, reinforced by extreme displays of commitment, most notably the massive dragon tattoo on Kazama's back, seen as a symbol of absolute loyalty. In the late 1980s, the world entered the boom years of the bubble economy. Pet dogs were selling fast, and the Africa Kennel dog farm was thriving as well. By October 1994, they spent more than $1 million to build a new residential area and a new kennel facility. However, 2 years earlier, they had already been audited by the National Tax Agency, and in the years before that, they had taken out mortgages and fixed-interest loans secured by real estate, so the cost of $1 million became an enormous burden. Looked at closely, spending $1 million to build a new kennel and home right at that moment was a reckless move. Japan's bubble economy had, in reality, already ended after the stock market turmoil triggered by Black Monday in 1989 and the Hong Kong stock market crash. Even so, the afterglow of the bubble still lingered in Japanese society, and public awareness of that reality remained vague. It wasn't until 1995, when the Hanshin Awaji earthquake struck and the sarin gas attack hit the Tokyo subway, that people truly realized the bubble had burst and the era of celebration was over. In other words, during the first half of the 1990s, Japan entered a strange period that felt detached from reality, with people living in an atmosphere of lingering extravagance. Perhaps it was that momentum of the times that helped push the kennel's owners to decide on a $1 million expansion. But before the new kennel was completed, selling dogs began to get difficult, debts piled up, and the business ran into mounting trouble. And that was when the serial murders began. The common thread was that every victim was killed with poison and then disposed of in different places to erase the trail. The first victim was an executive at a waste disposal company. Akio Kawasaki, a 39-year-old executive at an industrial waste processing firm in Ueda, befriended Sekine after visiting the Africa Kennel to buy a dog. At the time, Kawasaki was encouraged by his older brother to expand into dog breeding, so he purchased 2 Rhodesian Ridgebacks for $70,000. Later, however, an acquaintance told him the market price for such dogs was far lower and that both animals were too old and unsuitable for breeding. The female dog later ran away, making breeding impossible. Furious, Kawasaki returned the male dog and demanded a refund. Meanwhile, the Africa Kennel was in serious financial distress, and Sekine and Kazama decided to plan Kawasaki's murder to avoid paying the money back. On the night of April 20th, 1993, Kawasaki was invited to talk with Sekine in Sekine's car. There, Kawasaki was killed. When Yamazaki, Sekine's driver, returned to the garage, Sekine showed him the body and threatened to kill him if he reported it. After that, Kawasaki was disposed of in the Usurune River in Kawaba, while his personal belongings were dumped in Ose National Park. The victim's car was driven to Tokyo and abandoned. The scene was staged to make it appear as if the executive had simply disappeared on his own. The second victim was Yasutoshi Endo, the leader of a criminal group affiliated with the Yakuza syndicate Inagawa Kai. Endo worked as a bodyguard for Africa Kennel, a company that frequently got into disputes with customers. Suspecting Sekine was involved in Kawasaki's disappearance, Endo began extorting Sekine for a large sum. In the end, Sekine and Kazama feared these demands would jeopardize their business expansion plans, so they decided to eliminate Endo and his driver. On the night of July 21, 1993, Sekine, Kazama, and Yamazaki drove to a location designated by Endo. Sekine and Kazama got out to meet Endo, while Yamazaki stayed inside the car. The pair pretended to comply with the gangster's demands, handed over a letter of resignation, and then killed both men using a method similar to the first victim's case. The fourth victim was Mitsue Sekiguchi, a housewife in Ueda. She began an affair with Sekine when her second son started working at Africa Kennel. However, as the business struggled financially due to Endo's extortion and the investment in building a new kennel, Sekine begged Sekiguchi to become a shareholder in the company. At first, Sekine intended to take her money, but then realized the lie about her shareholder status would eventually be exposed. If that happened, he would not only have to return the investment, but also pay for 6 Alaskan Malamutes totaling $56,000. That, along with Sekine growing increasingly irritated with Sekiguchi, pushed him to kill her. On the afternoon of August 26, 1993, while driving around Ueda, Sekine killed Sekiguchi and stole $17,000. According to Yamazaki, Sekine handled her the same way as the previous victims. Early the next morning, he disposed of her in the Nuri River. Sekiguchi's disappearance, along with the 3 men before her, ultimately drew the unavoidable attention of investigators in Saitama Prefecture. The day after Kawasaki disappeared, his family reported him missing to the Ueda police. At first, they assumed he had simply run off, but once his car was found in Tokyo, authorities opened an investigation. From the family's account, police learned that Kawasaki had previously been in a dispute with Sekine, who, even then, was already surrounded by rumors linked to several earlier disappearances. Police began monitoring Sekine and Yamazaki and gradually connected Kawasaki's disappearance to the disappearances of Endo, Wakui, and Sekiguchi. On January 26, 1994, Yoshinori Ueda, the man who killed multiple dog owners in Osaka, was arrested. Although the 2 cases were unrelated, rumors quickly spread that Saitama might have similar incidents, and from mid-February onward, the media focused on Africa Kennel almost daily. While Sekine repeatedly insisted he was innocent, the victims' families continued to accuse him. At that time, however, because police still lacked evidence, those allegations were treated as unsubstantiated. The biggest deadlock for Saitama police was that they could not find the bodies. In Japanese criminal practice, prosecuting murder without a body is an especially difficult evidentiary challenge. The turning point came only when cracks formed inside the group. Eiko Yanazaki, who was initially drawn in by Sekine's management philosophy, but later became entangled in the crimes as an unwilling accomplice, chose to break his silence. On September 22nd, Saitama Prefectural Police arrested Yamazaki on an unrelated fraud charge. The media immediately suspected he might know something about Sekine. During questioning, Yamazaki admitted involvement in earlier disappearances and hinted that Sekine was responsible for the more recent cases. However, in an October 17 interrogation, Yamazaki denied any involvement. After that, he fled with his second wife. Police issued an arrest warrant for the wife on suspicion of embezzling $315,000 from a construction company. When she was arrested, Yamazaki finally agreed to cooperate and submit to questioning. The interrogations continued until December 3rd, when Yamazaki ultimately admitted he had been involved in the murders. Eiko Yamazaki was Sekine's driver and an unwilling accomplice. He was born in Toyama Prefecture in January 1956. A bulldog owner, Yamazaki first heard about Sekine after seeing him at a dog show. When Yamazaki visited Africa Kennel to learn about Sekine's management philosophy, he was unexpectedly offered a position as an executive, but in reality, he became Sekine's driver.
Living in a converted freight car in Gunma, Yamazaki gave investigators a detailed map of the disposal sites. 10 days later, he personally led investigators to Karashina and pointed out the location of Kawasaki's remains. From January to February 1995, based on Yamazaki's confession, Saitama and Gunma police launched a joint search focused around Kumagaya and Karashina, while also combing through multiple locations in Kumagaya, Karashina, and other surrounding areas. The search results showed that in the forest within Ose National Park, authorities recovered fragments of bone and teeth, an amulet, a wristwatch, and many other items. In the Nuri River, they found a mobile phone, house and car keys, and dentures. Because the evidence had been severely damaged, DNA testing was not possible, but authorities identified the victims through discarded personal belongings. Many investigators had to scour the riverbed to locate objects, recovering numerous items that later became physical evidence. A similar situation was also reported in Gunma, where an investigator stated they had found discarded metal objects that appeared to have been there for about 2 years. Although Sekine believed every trace had been erased, careful searches upstream along the Usune River and in the Ose area still turned up evidence. Those small pieces of physical evidence, combined with Yamazaki's detailed testimony, became the foundation for the arrests of Sekine and Kazama on January 5, 1995. Yamazaki's decision to confess was seen not only as an act of conscience, but also as a survival move, because he believed he could become the next victim in Sekine's purge. One feature that sets the Saitama case apart from other serial murders is the existence of a philosophy systematically developed by Gen Sekine. Through the testimony of accomplice Eiko Yamazaki, Sekine did not view killing as an impulsive act, but as a tool to remove business and personal obstacles. He often boasted smugly about committing the perfect crime and believed he deserved a gold medal if murder were ever an organized sport. Sekine's philosophy revolved around 5 core principles, with the disposal of physical evidence as the highest priority. He always knew how to erase traces at the crime scene, often inside a car or at a breeding facility. He used rivers or scattered remains across remote mountainous areas like Ose National Park, exploiting natural forces to wipe away every trace. It was this very perfect method that made the investigation incredibly difficult. Physical evidence was almost negligible, so the case relied largely on Yamazaki's testimony. On top of the extremely limited material evidence, the criminal trial that followed dragged on as Sekine and Kazama repeatedly blamed each other for the murders, while prosecutors argued that all 3 shared equal responsibility. Adding to that, Yamazaki, who had confessed to everything during the investigation, cooperated voluntarily, and even reached a plea deal with prosecutors, refused to testify once the case moved to the courtroom. On July 7, 1995, Yamazaki's trial was held at the Ueda District Court, now the Saitama District Court, and the facts laid out in the indictment were generally accepted. Then, on July 24, Sekine and Kazama were put on trial at the same court. Sekine's attorney criticized prosecutors for not disclosing evidence or written statements. Kazama claimed she had no involvement in the murders or the disposal of bodies, arguing that Sekine forced her to help get rid of evidence after the crimes had already happened. In the Kawasaki case specifically, Kazama admitted that she drove the victim's car to Tokyo with Yamazaki, but denied knowing it was his car or why she had done it in the first place. By October 6th, at Yamazaki's third hearing, he stated that his confession had been made because of a deal with prosecutors, yet he refused to testify at the trials of his co-defendants. Yamazaki claimed the reason was that the chief prosecutor at the Ueda District Public Prosecutor's Office broke a promise to release him if he provided enough evidence. He also revealed that he had negotiated for his wife to be granted bail. The Ueda District Public Prosecutor's Office later said at a press conference that the bail had been handled according to standard procedure and denied that any agreement existed. Meanwhile, defense attorneys for Sekine and Kazama argued that Yamazaki could not be considered a reliable witness because of his prior fraud allegations. On December 15, 1995, Yamazaki was sentenced to 3 years in prison for participating in the murders. Although he claimed he had been coerced, the court pointed out that he had not been beaten or placed under surveillance, had only been threatened verbally, had many opportunities to contact authorities, and had participated in the crimes voluntarily. Yamazaki appealed to the Tokyo High Court, but the appeal was rejected. On September 3, 1998, when questioned in court, Sekine, who had previously neither denied nor admitted responsibility, finally acknowledged his involvement. However, he insisted that Kazama masterminded the murders and that Yamazaki carried out the killings, while he claimed he had only participated to protect his wife. After these statements, the couple repeatedly turned against each other. On July 6, 2000, prosecutors sought the death penalty for both Sekine and Kazama. The final arguments took place over 4 consecutive days, with Sekine asking for life imprisonment and Kazama demanding an acquittal. About 5 years after the trial began, the defendants were found guilty. In 2001, at the Urawa District Court, both Gen Sekine and Hiroko Kazama were sentenced to death based on the severity and brutality of the crimes. In their final ruling, the judges carefully examined the defendants' contradictory and complicated statements, and noted that even if secret arrangements had existed between Yamazaki and prosecutors, Sekine's confession still contained facts that only the perpetrator would know. Therefore, even if there were some lies or exaggerations, Yamazaki's confession was still regarded as credible. However, the appeals process exposed deep contradictions in the parties' testimony. Sekine, in a last attempt to save himself, pushed full responsibility for carrying out the killings onto Kazama and Yamazaki, claiming he had only been the one giving orders. Kazama, on the other hand, admitted helping dispose of bodies, but firmly denied taking part in any murder plot or directly killing anyone, arguing that she was controlled by Sekine and acted under psychological coercion. Even so, the Tokyo High Court in 2005 and the Supreme Court in 2009 upheld the death sentences for both of them. Judges stated that Kazama's role in managing Africa Kennel and her presence at disposal sites showed she was an active, indispensable partner in the chain of crimes. After sentencing, both Sekine and Kazama were transferred to the Tokyo Detention House to await execution. In November 2016, Sekine became ill and required emergency treatment at the prison hospital. He died of multiple organ failure on the morning of March 27, 2017, at the age of 75, ending the life of the man known as the Saitama Demon before his death sentence could be carried out. Hiroko Kazama remains incarcerated and is one of the few women on Japan's death row. She continues to file requests for retrial, drawing attention from human rights organizations and from those who believe she is innocent of murder.
Eiko Yamazaki served his 3-year prison sentence for violating a corpse and returned to ordinary life after completing his term in 1998.
The Saitama serial murder case tied to Japan's dog lover community left more than a scar on the country's legal history. It became a lasting lesson about the complexity of human psychology and the gaps that can exist in social oversight. Gen Sekine, armed with a ruthless murder philosophy, pushed the justice system to its limits. But in the end, his own arrogance and the resistance of the very people he once manipulated helped bring down the Africa Kennel empire. Even after Sekine's death, the case has not fully closed. Hiroko Kazama continues her legal fight from Japan's death row. The legal reforms and the growing public awareness of animal welfare are seen as rare points of light to emerge from the darkness of this tragedy. And so, the Saitama case is still remembered as a warning about the danger of misplaced trust and about the kind of systematic brutality that can grow when human lives are treated as mere obstacles to be made to disappear. Africa Kennel shut down after the scandal was exposed. Even so, the buildings that once housed the kennel's business have not been demolished, and they still stand in Kumagaya. In the early 1990s, both cases unfolded in the same era, but for very different reasons. Sekine killed to preserve a life of luxury and control. Ueda, meanwhile, acted after a personality shift brought on by debt and after becoming fixated on what he had witnessed, a dog being euthanized with an injection. The contrast in how they handled the bodies also reflects a major difference in planning. Sekine operated with far more preparation and calculation, while Ueda simply buried his victims at his farm. Together, the two cases sent shockwaves through Japanese public opinion, sparking urgent calls to tighten oversight of the pet industry and strengthen animal protection. At the time, rules around owning and trading dangerous or rare animals were so loose that people like Sekine could keep tigers and lions inside residential areas with little meaningful legal resistance. The lessons drawn from these cases directly contributed to the 1999 revision of Japan's animal protection and management law. At the same time, the cases marked a turning point in Japan's forensic investigation methods. Recovering DNA evidence from bone fragments that had been burned and scattered in water for long periods demonstrated the growing sophistication of forensic biotechnology. It also set a precedent for imposing the death penalty in cases where bodies could not be fully recovered, based on a network of circumstantial evidence and highly consistent accomplice testimony.